Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Paddle Pod, your weekly podcast covering professional paddle presented by Hugo and Gons. We're on to episode 100, and as always, joined by my co-host Hugo here today. Hugo, it's great to have you on. How are you doing?
I'm not bad, thanks, Gons. Yeah, down by the beach, as you know, so making the most of the summer over here in Spain. I have to get away from Madrid, given that it's basically like a boiling hot pan at the moment. And yeah, obviously very happy because we had a great tournament in Malaga this season. Sorry, not this season, this past week anyway. And I think I said this season because for me it was probably one of the best tournaments of the season.
Yeah, it was a great tournament. Maybe before we get into it, I just want to say that our special episode will be coming next week. We have a bit of a break in the calendar, given that actually this week there is no paddle and Tarragona starts next week. So next week we will be uploading our special episode, so stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, of course, we will discuss the Malaga P1. And as you were saying, Hugo, it's a great tournament. It was absolutely amazing. I thought that the level throughout was really good. I think once again, to be honest, just due to the indoor courts.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think, yeah, time and time again, the tournaments and the players prove that paddle is so
It's
much,
an indoor sport.
yeah, so much better as an indoor sport. This doesn't mean that it can't be an outdoor sport. That's for sure.
No, of course not.
But maybe you should limit it. And I'm thinking, obviously, you compare it to tennis, which is always like paddle's older brother, or whatever you want to call it. Grass, right? That's a very niche surface, a very
Mm.
interesting surface to watch, but nonetheless a tough surface to play on. Matches are very quick. You depend a lot on the serve. Players do get more injured because of the fact that it's, uneven and slippery. And I think that's the reason why basically there's only a couple of weeks throughout the whole year where tennis is played on grass, whereas throughout the rest of the year, I mean, the majority of the year is played on hard court. So maybe tennis should be the example that paddle should look up to. I mean, it's clearly an issue regarding the infrastructures. There's probably a lot of places that Premier Paddle goes to and sets up tournaments in where there's just not a big enough indoor infrastructure. But if that's the case, then maybe they should just focus on the places that can have and can support indoor facilities up until the point when more and more countries and cities can host indoor tournaments, right?
No, exactly. And then, as you said, you complement it with some outdoor tournaments here and there. Obviously, there's some incredible outdoor venues that look amazing, obviously, Plaza. But as you said, you probably want the bulk of the season to be kind of indoor. And even within indoor conditions, you see sometimes the courts vary, right? It's not always the same type of court. And actually, I thought that Malaga was kind of a bit of a different one because the conditions were like quite decently fast. Like it wasn't like a super slow indoor court. You could definitely smash. I mean, we saw the smash being used, I think, throughout the week quite a bit, and it paid off, right? It wasn't like one of those indoor courts where you just couldn't like hit anything. So I liked it because we saw that bit of variety where you're still seeing very high quality level of paddle, but you also, if you go for a smash, you can also reap the rewards essentially.
Yeah, agreed. And I don't know whether you feel the same way, Gons, but when I think about the speed in Malaga, and I've said a lot of times, I think it's pretty much the perfect speed in the sense that
Mm.
it's not too slow, but it's not too fast. There's obviously the scale is very varied, but I think it's in and around the sweet spot. Not only that is as an amateur or ascending paddle player, it's the court speed that we're probably most used to. I don't know whether you agree, but it's that kind of court where if you really have a great smash, you're going to be able to take a huge advantage of it. Obviously, in amateur paddle, not everyone has a smash. So when you do have it, it's obviously a huge threat, but it's not absolutely definitive. You can beat pairs and players, even if, say, us as a pair, we don't have a hugely prominent smash, but you can beat other pairs by, keeping it low, not playing stupid lobs that make points very easy for the rivals, etc. So yeah, I just have a feeling that that kind of speed is probably one of the speeds that we're most used to as fans and players.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. But maybe moving on, obviously the main event, the final of the Malaga P1, we saw El Clasico once again, uh, obviously, and that is, Coello Tapia against Chingotto and Gálan, and this time it went Coello and Tapia's way. If I'm not
Sure.
mistaken, the score was 6-4, 7-5. But I would say a very statement win. I felt like this week throughout, Coello and Tapia seemed like they had something to prove. It seemed like they were on edge. It seemed like they were motivated, and yeah, I mean they kind of ran over Chingotto and Gálan. Even though I do feel like Chingotto and Gálan made the final quite interesting, I thought that they did play very well. But I had the feeling throughout that you just always knew that Coy and Tapia were in control, and they were a level above, to be honest. I thought both of them played absolutely amazing. Tapia, I thought his first set was absolutely sensational, and then I thought Coello in the second set was maybe a bit better. Also, I had a feeling that potentially they were looking for him a bit more in that second set, and especially throughout when Chingotangalan had the break points, they had like three in one of the games. All of the balls went to Coello, and he managed to win all the points essentially, and then they managed to hang on to their game and essentially win at the end, win the set and win the match. So absolutely sensational, I thought, from Coy and Tapia, who I don't know, throughout this week we'd kind of always been talking about them, and they were winning obviously. So obviously, they were having the results, but just the attitude on court seemed a bit off. They seemed like they were kind of mentally, maybe not as motivated, not that up for it. But to be honest, like in this match, just saw them completely different. Now I don't know what you think about this. I'll throw it back to you now, but it almost felt like a really fiery match. Like all four of them, I don't know, they were like shouting constantly. So many of the blocks, like it felt like they were trying to hit each other's body like crazy. I don't know. It felt like a really fiery match. The intensity, like you could just feel it throughout the points, the pace of the game, like when you watch that final versus like the semifinals, for example, it's just like, I don't know, I felt like it was a completely different speed, which I guess reflects like just the overall level of both of the pairs.
I think, yeah, I mean, just quickly on that point that you make, and obviously looking at could actually probably be the best match of the tournament, which was that semi-final encounter between Mike Yanguas and Coki and Nieto against Gálan and Fede Chingotto, which we'll talk about maybe in a little bit. That was a slower match, but I think it's just due to the fact and due to the kind of characteristics of the players, particularly Coki Nieto, who loves taking the match to kind of a physical battle, just limited unforced errors, force the rival to make that mistake. And he's very comfortable to go back and forth, because he's obviously one of the fittest players on tour. So him, and I think Mike Yanguas as well, I think he's a player that's quite happy to kind of sit at the back and maybe counter-attack a little bit with well, you could call them recuperations when the other player goes for a smash and he's up at the net and puts the ball away. I think that's probably one of his best assets because he's so tall and he's so good at it. So I think they're both very keen to play on the counter-attack. So maybe that affected the speed, apart from the fact that obviously Coello and Tapia have implemented this since they teamed up together. They've implemented this ultra aggressive paddle that obviously Lebron and Gálan started. So I definitely agree with you on that point. Yeah, looking into maybe the gameplay specifically in the final, I did think that it was super even, and I could easily see it going the other way in the sense that, hey, what would have happened if Chingotto and Gálan had made that break where they had 4 break points in the second set, sorry. They could have gone into a third set, and I'm sure it would have been very even as well. But I agree with you. I always had that little feeling that Coello and Tapia just seemed a little bit more on control. I think it's in a big part due to the fact that they were very comfortable in those court conditions. They both obviously have the ability to dominate with their smash, and you could see it. Obviously, Chingotto, funnily enough, went for a lot of smashes throughout the match. And actually, I mean, I think his effectiveness was pretty close to 100%, but he's not going to be hitting them from the back, like, say, in and around the back line, whereas Coello and Tapia were doing that time and time again. So I think because they were so comfortable and they were feeling that they were playing so well. I think when they feel that they're playing well, they feel that they're unstoppable. We've very rarely seen them lose a match when we've both said they've been at their best. It's just really not happened that often. So I think that's probably the reason why we had that feeling. And I mean, yeah, looking at the gameplay specifically, Gons, you and I spoke about this briefly offline, talking about the match yesterday and this morning. I thought the smashing across all players was prolific. It's a shame that we no longer have Padel Intelligence's statistics to look into. Massive shame. And obviously we do hope that everything's done to have them again available and accessible. But I'd love to see each player's statistics on smashes, because honestly, I don't think any of them got found out more than once. They were all unbelievable. Coello and those key points that you mentioned. Tapia's kick smash, honestly, was probably the best definition of what a kick smash should look like. I mean, I haven't seen him smashing so well for, I'd say, at least 4 or 5 months, to be honest. And then from Gálan's side, again, super dominant with his smash and even Chingotto. So I just felt from that perspective, they were all almost, 100% efficient, which we very rarely see in these finals.
No, 100%. And what do you think about the intensity of the match in terms of, did you feel like they were fiery? Did you feel like there was some, I don't want to say like animosity, but I don't know. There was like a couple of points where I remember one specifically where I think Goyo blocks the ball and it kind of floats, and Galan's like about to step in, and he's like he does a huge volley straight at Goyo's body, but he doesn't get it. He hits the net, and then Goyo turns around and he just shouts like a crazy Vamos. So and I just felt like throughout the match, like there was just this I don't know, maybe it was just the four of them like really wanted and really felt it, but I felt like there was a level of intensity, not only the speed game, which we just talked about, but more like an attitude that I don't think I'd seen in the previous matches.
No, definitely agree once again. And actually, I wanted to address that point, but I kind of forgot going through the other points that I mentioned. I think that was down to two factors. One, I think both pairs know that this was a key tournament looking at the rest of the season and for the number one race. I know that the race is very tight, but it just feels like Goya and Dabia now have a big upper hand. I know points wise they're close, etc., but realistically, there's not that many tournaments left. I know there's a lot of tournaments in September, and I know there's a couple of in October, but for example, I think December only has the finals. Obviously, we don't have any tournaments in August. So I think everyone in the paddle world, them, spectators, fans, I mean, us, we discussed it. Everyone knew that this was one of the most important finals. Also because pairs want to go into the summer break feeling at their best, because we know how important that is from a psychological point of view. So I think that was a big factor. And two, which is also linked as to why I think it was one of the best tournaments, one of the best finals of the season, etc., is because they have had breaks in between tournaments recently. Obviously, the previous tournament, which was in Bordeaux, there was a week's break. Then we had Malaga now. Then there's another week's break. So I just feel like the players are now rested and they are all kind of at their 100% to perform as well as possible. I feel like there's been moments throughout the season when you have maybe 3 tournaments in a row and players are just carrying injuries. I mean, Coki and Yanguas has spoken about the injury that he's been carrying for a couple of months. I actually realized, I don't know whether you've seen this, but I very rarely see Mike Yanguas not wearing his kind of knee support. It's like this
Yeah.
very thin tape, his white tape. He wasn't wearing it this week in Malaga. He's had knee issues throughout his whole career. So it just feels like players have benefited massively from the calendar. And now is when they're kind of at their max from a physical standpoint. So maybe that has made them, well, A, play better, and B, just kind of be more up for it, right? I mean, if you're
Yeah.
absolutely knackered, maybe you can't shout as much.
Yeah. No, it's a good point as well because I think the traveling aspect has probably improved this past month. We've gone from the kind of South American tour and all the, the beginning of the season where, there was tournaments in Miami, there's tournaments in Middle East, obviously in South America, and now they're all in Europe. And obviously some of them or a lot of them even in Spain as well, where players live. So that probably helps as well, the fact that they just don't have to travel so much. They're not spending so much time on a plane. Because obviously all of these things at the end of the day just create so much fatigue, both physically and mentally. So definitely agree with you there. And yeah, I just thought it was really interesting because obviously I think that over the past few like encounters that we've seen of them, I felt like they had lack that level of intensity, but this one, I mean, brought the heat. And something as well that I wanted to maybe just touch upon on this matchup. I feel like over the past few weeks as well, I do think that Chingalan have kind of like stepped it up. Obviously, they beat in the Rome Major, they beat them, and they've made the finals like super close. I feel like, I mean, I remember that stretch throughout, obviously the end of the second half of last season, and kind of even the beginning of this season, where just, I mean, they were nowhere to be seen, and Coello and Tapia were, it was like, it was quite a cakewalk for them. But I don't know, I feel like I'm starting to seeing a lot of small things, small adjustments that they're starting to play. They're starting to vary. Who do they play to? And some of the shots, I felt like in this match in particular, I felt like in the second set, all of a sudden they stopped playing a lot of the lobs, and they would just go. They would do the walk, even if it's like not a perfect chiquita. In order to win the net, they would just do one shot and step in as soon as they could. I don't know. I just feel like the matchup, the quality of it, I feel like has also increased because obviously they're bringing up their level, which probably means that Coy and Tapia also have to adjust to that if they want to keep winning. And certainly in this match, I mean, they did.
Yeah, I do massively agree with your point in the sense that I do feel like Chingalan have stepped it up. They're playing really, really well. They're, varying their kind of, plans and strategies even within matches. As you said yesterday, they were playing lobs and then they saw Tapia wasn't playable and even Coello wasn't playable up in the air. So they were going for a chiquita and just trying to dominate with those sorts of approaches and gameplays. But then playing devil's advocate, since their recent win, they've obviously made the final twice. They lost in that semi-final against Lebron and Stupa. So Coello and Tapia have now won 3 straight tournaments. And in these 2 finals that they've played since that Rome final, Coello and Tapia have won in 2 sets. Plus, obviously, that semi-final loss against Stupa and Lebron that had never happened before. So I kind of feel like from a playing perspective, yes, they are doing really well and as well as they can do, to be honest. But I just think Coello and Tapia are now at their best. And when they're at their best, no one can match them.
No,
I
I
still,
agree.
yeah.
I agree. Like, I think in this match, I think I saw them like going back to kind of the level they had been showing towards the end of last year, where they're just a level above, to be honest. And Chingalan, as you said, I thought that they basically played as well as they could. I mean, sometimes, yes, Chingotto did some couple of unforced errors here and there, but I almost felt like those were they were asked because in order to be that level of Koy and Tapia, you have to take those risks. So it just feels like Koy and Tapia just have that extra gear, and I think we also saw when they were beating them. I think these last couple of finals before this one, where I didn't like personally, I didn't think that Koy and Tapia were playing that great, but they still won, right? They're still hanging in there. They still managed to find a way. So I do agree with you that I mean it just feels like Koy and Tapia have this extra level that just even Chingalan, they have to have, their absolute A plus day. But even then, it's probably impossible if Goy and Tapia have their also, their A game.
Yeah, I mean, yes, you can make a point that we've both said this quite a lot. Chingotto started to miss or to increase his unforced error count more than what we're used to. Okay, yeah, that is true, but it is because he's trying to take way more risks because he needs to, because otherwise
Yeah.
they will not be generating those advantages. And then maybe Gálan showing some signs of frustration again in some moments. Some of his, I say yesterday, his lobs weren't particularly great. Quite a few of his lobs went long, but again, that's because any lob that
Yeah,
was going
you're
in
exactly.
and around the line was being brought back by Coello and Tapia with an unplayable smash. So either side, because it was both Tapia and Coello. So
Yeah.
yeah, I just feel that those mistakes are totally normal and they are just playing probably some of the best paddle that Chingalan have played. It's just that Coello and Tapia are as well.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe moving on, one of the other highlights, of course, I think this tournament has been Coki and Yanguas, who finally they, back again, made it into the semi-final of a major tournament. I mean, it had been a while since we'd seen Coki and Yanguas make a semi-final, but potentially, as you alluded to, Hugo, I think some of it definitely would be down to the fact that Coki has kind of been carrying a bit of an injury. Whereas I feel like in this tournament, he seemed to be at least physically, he seemed to be like at his best. I mean, that semi-final game, I think, as you mentioned at the beginning of the episode, was probably the best match of the tournament. I think it was absolutely insane, and I think it's funny because if I'm not mistaken, the match lasted, like 2 hours and a half or something like that. But the first set was like 20 minutes, which is so you can just see how tight the essentially the other two sets were. And I mean that first set was honestly it was like a perfect storm because I feel like it was one of those where Coki and Yanguas literally could do nothing wrong, and Chingotto literally did everything wrong. I
Yeah.
don't think have we ever seen? I mean, maybe other than Coki and Tapia, but have we ever seen Chingotto lose a set 6-1? Like, honestly, I can't, at least not at the top of my head. But yeah, I mean, Coki was just absolutely sensational. I think from the defending, attacking, and Yang was I thought as well had his moments. I think potentially towards the end of the match, maybe they were looking for him a bit more, and maybe he was the one that was doing a bit more of the kind of mistakes. But overall, I thought they played absolutely sensational, and I also on Chingalan side felt like Gálan was kind of the player that grew a bit throughout the match, especially in that second and third set where he started smashing more. I think that's where he kind of took a bit over, and obviously that kind of gave Chingalan the edge.
Yeah, with this semi-final encounter, it's like, was that the best game of the tournament or was it the final? Because maybe as a game and due to the evenness, it was the semi, but in terms of just the level, it could have
Yeah,
been
I
the
would say the
final.
level, maybe the final. Yeah.
So it's honestly it's there and thereabouts, but yeah, great to see Gogi back to his best. I mean, he addressed his injury issue. He said that it hasn't been a massive injury, but he hasn't had many injuries throughout his career. He's been lucky. And the fact that it's just been kind of niggling on consistently for a couple of months has been really tough from a mental standpoint. So great to see him back to his best. I've always vouched for Yanguas and Kogi. I think they work. I just think that
Mm.
you've got that aggressive forehand player with more of a defensive backhand player that is almost like this traditional pair up, but inversed. So,
Yeah.
you normally have the aggressive backhand player and the consistent forehand, a little bit more defensive minded forehand player. So I've always liked it. I'm really happy to see them doing so well. It's the second time this season that they lose 7-6 in the third set to Chingalan. So that must be tough from a mental standpoint. But I think they've got to take the positives, making the semifinals after so many weeks where they haven't made that. They haven't made the last four, having Coki and Nieto fully recuperated. And yeah, I mean, I thought, to be honest, I was going to say that Coki and Yanguas was the MVP of the semi-final for me, but it's just so easy to overlook Galan's performance, and I think it'd be unfair on him. I mean, I wouldn't say single-handedly won the match. That's not true, but honestly, his smashing was one of the best performances that I've seen in 2025. It's just he was smashing absolutely everything, and a lot of times he was just running across and getting right behind Chingotto, taking a massive risk. And Yanguas, who, as I said before, is one of the best players when he's up at the net to recuperate a smash, he really didn't get that many of them. Beyond that first set, where obviously everything went wrong for Chingalan and right for Coki and Yanguas. Yeah, I mean, Gálan, sensational, Gogi, sensational. Both Yanguas and Chingotto were really, really good. It's just compared to the other two, it doesn't feel like they were as good, but I thought they were unbelievable. And my only but was that deciding tiebreak in the third set. I did feel that Yanguas underperformed, to be honest. Chingotto and Gálan looked for him, and I feel that he made a couple of unforced errors that just made it very hard for them because I'm not mistaken. Did they go 4-love or 5-love down?
5-love, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when you go 5-love down, it's it's mission impossible. And I just felt that the majority of those points, it was Yanguas's fault, whether it was because he was making an unforced error or whether it was because he was leaving or playing the wrong shot or the wrong lob, Mangalan coming in and finishing the point. But yeah, it was a shame because I did want to see them make the final. Not because I don't love watching an El Clasico, it's because it would have been great to watch a different final. And obviously, Yanguas playing at home as well, because he's from Malaga. He was born there, so in and around the area. But hey, fully deserved from Chingalan. And as I say, one of my favorite matches of the year.
Yeah, I don't know. Koki seemed to me like he was that prime Koki that we saw in the World Cup final with Coello, honestly. Like he was just absolutely unplayable as well. And I feel like an underrated shot of him that maybe he'll start like actually maybe he'll start catching on is the smash block. Honestly, I don't think I've seen a player like block smashes so well. Like he was consistently getting Galan's smash back on court and to the point where eventually Gálan actually changed and he wasn't targeting Coki anymore. When he was hitting his smash, he was hitting more towards Yanguas. because like Coki was able to block it, and we've seen it like time and time again. Like he's one of those players that when he, when they go for a smash, like he happily just sits there, puts his racket and tries to block it, which I feel like is a bit of an underrated shot. I mean, absolutely sensational. And yeah, I think as well something that I kind of really like and find positive for the pair is that they obviously had been struggling, and I don't know if maybe they, internally they thought like, should we switch and all of these things. And they, like we've said time and time again, they decided to stick it out, and now they're maybe back on track, and kind of like they kind of went, they got better out of a bad situation, and they were to stick it out instead of doing the easy thing and pulling out. So I really respect that, and we'll see. I think how things have fallen, and we've talked about this in the past. It probably means that they'll definitely stick towards at least until the end of the season, unless obviously anything hugely at the very top happens, which we don't expect. So yeah, I mean it's great to see, and like you said, I think they do work quite well. When you watch them play, I like their style. Like they're aggressive, they like to go up at the net, and they're both really physically gifted, I would say, and they do a bit of everything. So it's great to see. They're also great characters. I feel like they're both, really likable players. Yanguas, sometimes here and there there's a, a little bit of controversy on court, but overall he's a funny guy, and he's a good bloke. But yeah, I mean, I think maybe moving on, one of the other highlights that we wanted to discuss is, of course, I think, well, a new player entering the tour, at least for one of these tournaments. Maxi Arce joining forces with Stupa, given that LeBron unfortunately is still injured. Is he coming back to
He
Tarragona?
is. Yeah, they've
He
registered
is.
for the tournament. Yeah.
Okay, so that's great to hear. Maxi Arce, who used to play on paddle with Dal Bianco, if I'm not mistaken. So they were obviously one of the top pairs there with Tolito and Gonta Alfonso when they were there. So great to see him, and I would say pretty strong debut. I mean, they had a resounding victory against Los Javis, Garcia and Barahona, who are like they are a very solid pair, and as well bringing it quite tight to Chingalan with a two set, a very tight score. So I think it just shows that obviously when they are together, like we saw Gonfa and Tolito being together, but both from A1 paddle, and they would still make a good progress in the tournaments. But you see the potential of one of the good A1 paddle players actually with obviously a very good Premier Paddle player still be able to make the quarterfinals, which is, I would say, especially on his debut, I would say is a pretty strong result, and shows you that obviously these guys can still play and play at a high level as well.
No, and to be honest, in that quarterfinal encounter against Chingalan, which Stupa and Maxi Arce lost, what was it, 7-5, 6-4 or something
Six
like
four,
that?
yeah.
It could have gone either way. I loved that match. I mean, they broke each other's serve consistently throughout the third set. I mean, at least twice either way, if I'm not mistaken, maybe even 3 times.
The second, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I thought they were really, really good. I thought it was a really even matchup. And honestly, who knows what would have happened if one set had gone or fallen Stupa and Arce's way. And yeah, focusing specifically on Maxi Arce, he just looked completely in sync with Stupa. I don't know how they've managed that. I think that obviously speaks volumes of Stupa. We've said how good he is at changing pairs and performing with every single player he's teamed up with, right? I mean, he's won with Alex Ruiz, he's won with Pablo Lima, he's won with Dineno, he's won with Lebron, he's won with Sanyo. It's amazing. He's won with everyone. Obviously shows how good he is at adapting to his partner. A bit like Bella, to be honest, right? I think Bella, every time he's teamed up with a new player, and a lot of times when you hear other players talking about him, is how good he's been for the pair and how much he's been able to adapt his style to his partner. So yeah, I really, really like that from Stupa. But yeah, from Maxi, great to see him play Premier Padel. He's definitely up to the standard. No question about that. Will that cast some doubts in Stupa's mind? Will that make him look elsewhere? I doubt it. I think him and Lebron are probably in their best moment as a pair. I mean, when you think about it, they beat Chingalan in their last tournament just before Lebron's been out for 2 in a row, Bordeaux and Malaga. So excited to watch their return in Tarragona next week. I'm going to watch every single match of that tournament, to be honest, because that's the last one until September. So I'm going to be craving paddle for a few weeks. But yeah, great match. And guys, if you haven't watched that quarterfinal match between Arce and Stupa against Chingalan, yeah, crack it on, because Arce did a bit of everything. I mean, he good smashing, defensively, he was very rock solid. I mean, Gálan in an interview after the match said that there were moments in the match where they actually had to change their plan and play more of the balls to Stupa because Arce was making no mistakes. So yeah, all in all, great debut.
And as well, I think what's impressive is the fact that A1, we saw obviously the all the issues that happened with A1 that essentially has been dissolved. There haven't been any tournaments. So I wonder, like, has he just been training but with no real, competition rhythm? So the fact that you just like straight up coming to a P1 in Malaga and, making your debut, reaching quarterfinals and putting it really difficult to the second seeded pair, I think is absolutely amazing. So well done to him, and obviously would love for him and other A1 paddlers would love to see them in the fold, because I think it's super interesting obviously when we get to see new players as well. And maybe talking a bit just the final one, talking a bit about A1, we can translate this to Chotas and Tolito Aguirre that made his first quarterfinals, I would say, outside of the, when everyone's there and there's a full draw, let's put it that way. But obviously, I mean, it's a very interesting partnership, I would say, with Chotas, and they did reach the quarterfinal. So, very strong tournament from them as well. And then we'll see. I don't know if you've seen lately, but I've been seeing images of kind of Tolito, how he was at the beginning of the season and how he is now. And I must say, like, that seems like he's undergone a big change physically. And so, I mean, massive props to him in that sense. If he wants to, obviously, it seems like he really wants to step up. He really wants to continue to improve, which is obviously great to see. I mean, the talent's there, right? I think there's no question about that. So yeah, great to see that.
Yeah, I mean, he spoke about his physical change and how much he's been working on his fitness in a recent interview, if I'm not mistaken. He said that, when you start playing Premier Paddle tournaments, everyone is at their peak, not just from a technical and tactical standpoint, but also from a physical standpoint. So he's really upped his game. I agree. I mean, I think him and Chothas together look like an exciting pair from a capabilities and technical perspective, definitely.
Yeah.
Slightly hesitant to believe in them from a mental standpoint. Funnily enough, more in Chothas, because when you look at Chothas shot per shot, I think he's unbelievable. He's got everything. He's got a B-Wada, he's got smash, he's got the volleys, and he can play on both sides. So I think he's really, he is almost like the ultimate modern player. I just think that mentally he's let himself down a lot. He's made a lot of unforced errors in those matchups against the top pairs, and that's perhaps let him down. But yeah, I mean, great. They made the quarterfinals. It is true that they had a slightly favorable draw because obviously John and Momo had to pull out against the Deus brothers who were there, Tolito and Chothas's rivals in the last 16. So I guess slightly favorable draw, but all in all, great experience for them to make the final 8 and hopefully onwards and upwards, because the more pairs that we see making those rounds and fighting for them, the better.
Yeah, I still feel like maybe just a quick comparison. Like sometimes I always like to kind of big picture compare paddle and tennis. And whilst in tennis you still have basically like paddle, just the same players winning every time, I do feel like within the tournaments, there's definitely a lot more variance. You have like, seeded like players drop out, like, first rounds, all of this. And I feel like with paddle, each round is still fairly predictable, if you see what I mean. Obviously, you do get changes here and there, but it's still very much, the top four seeds probably going to make the semifinals, and the top eight seeds probably going to make the quarters and all of that. But it's great, hopefully we do start get to a point where it's so competitive, any player is good that you can really, anyone can beat anyone on a given day, and you get these random, third seeded pair drops out, first round because of a loss. And yeah, which I mean, like I said, probably it still probably will be the final, Coello and Tapia against Chingalan. But within that tournament, it still be interesting to see obviously, these players reach new levels.
I think it can happen when you look at the landscape at the moment. I mean, we haven't even spoken about the women's game, but the women's game recently,
Yeah, that one has
wow.
been, yeah.
I mean, this final didn't have either of the top two pairs who both lost in the quarterfinals round. And I mean, the number one spot's up for grabs, but focusing on the male side of things, obviously Coki and Yanguas hadn't made the semifinals for 4 or 5 straight tournaments. They're the 4th seeded pair, as I said. Momo and John doing unbelievably well recently, and I could see them challenging the top pairs, to be honest. Maybe not in the super fast conditions, but yeah, I mean, pretty much on any other court, I think they can do it. I'm really liking them. Then obviously Leal and Guerrero, in-form pair, caused huge upsets already. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's a bit of a shame that Cardona and Ausburger are now, they've gone separate ways because they were kind of the surprise kings this season, also due to their seeding. So I guess we'll see whether Tello, Cardona, and Dineno Ausburger can cause some upsets as well. I think they will.
Yeah, I mean, exciting to watch them obviously next week. And yeah, this probably brings us to the end of the episode. It's been a pleasure as always, Hugo. Please, everyone, do leave your comments and your thoughts about the Malaga P1. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, stay tuned for next week. I mean, it's going to be very special. We'll release our bonus episode for a 100th episode, and obviously we have the Tarragona P1 with the new pairs as you just mentioned, which will be, I think, extra exciting. No more paddle for a while, so I mean, everyone, I think you're just gonna have to stick to your sofa and watch the TV all day.
Yeah, literally. Thanks, guys. Pleasure as always, and catch you soon.